Welcome back, everyone. One important thing to understand about Streamlit is how it handles user interactions. Whenever you interact with any input element, like sliders, text fields, or dropdowns, and change their values, the entire Streamlit script reruns. That's right. Dragging a date slider from March 1st to March 5th, or changing a dropdown menu from yes to no, will execute the entire script from the beginning. This behavior is crucial because it explains how Streamlit updates your web app in real time, ensuring that any changes or interactions are immediately reflected in the application. This might sound inefficient, but Streamlit is designed to handle this smoothly. Still, this behavior can be confusing when managing interactions between multiple components. Let's explore a common challenge: nested buttons. In programming, nested means placing one element inside another. I'll guide you through an example to help us understand how these reruns affect our apps. We'll start by creating a new Python file. Let's name it example1.py. Now, let's walk through each step. First, we import Streamlit as usual. Next, let's set a title for the app. We can use the familiar function title and pass the string nested buttons example as an argument. Now, let's create the first button. We'll use the Streamlit button method, which returns true when clicked. By default, a button state is false until it's clicked. Once pressed, the state changes to true, which triggers the code inside the block. Based on that, we'll display some text with the help of the write function. In this case, the text revealed will appear upon pressing the button, changing its state to true. Okay. Navigate to the console and run the application by writing streamlit run example1.py. Observe what happens. When the button is clicked, Streamlit reruns the script, and since the first button now returns true, it displays the text revealed. So, everything works as expected. Let's now create a second button inside the first button's logic. I'll copy the previous code and paste it inside the first if statement. Let's change the button's text from first to second button. This means that this second button will only appear when the first button is clicked. Additionally, if clicked, it should display the message second button clicked. Let's save the file and test out the program. The script reruns by clicking the first button, revealing the text and the second button. However, when we click the second button, the script reruns yet again. This time, the first button resets to its default state, false, as if it was never clicked, causing both the text and the second button to disappear. So, we can never reveal the text second button clicked. How do we address this? Streamlit provides a system called Sessin State. The Sessin State acts like a memory bank for your app, allowing it to remember the status of components even when the script reruns. This way, your app can keep track of user interactions without losing information or resetting elements. Alright, let's dive into how we can fix our code using the Sessin State. First, we need to initialize the state of each button using Streamlit's Sessin State method. We can check whether specific keys are present in the session state. If not, we need to initialize them as false. Let's start by creating a session state called showSecondButton to control whether the second button should be displayed. We do this by writing if showSecondButton not in st.sessionState. st.sessionState.showSecondButton equals to false. This code checks if the showSecondButton state is already in Streamlit session state. If not, we set the state to false, meaning the second button is hidden by default. Now, let's modify our first button so that when clicked, it changes the state we've just initialized to true. Here's how we do that. Inside the first if statement, type st.sessionState.showSecondButton equal to true. Great! Now, we must check if the second show button state is true to determine if we should display the second button and accompanying text. To do this, we implement an if statement that checks the session state like so. When this condition is met, both the text revealed and the second button will appear. Inside the second button's if block, we'll display a new message if the button is clicked. Now, let's test our code. The session state show second button is false by default, so the second button is hidden initially. We click the first button, which sets our session state to true. The second button is shown, and the text reads revealed. When we click the second button, the script reruns, showing the text. But because we're using session state, the first button state is preserved. We can see that all the elements are displayed. Note that, since the second button doesn't have a session state yet, if we interact with other elements or click the first button again, the program will rerun, resetting the second button's click state. To fix this, we could also initialize a session state for the second button, but I'll leave that as a challenge for you to explore on your own. Good job, everyone! That lesson was challenging, but I hope you got the hang of it. In our next lesson, we'll start building our first chatbot. Let's keep going.